First of all, thank you all for coming today. We appreciate your attendance and we hope you'll get some benefit from this. This is a presentation sponsored by the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges. And if you don't know who FAC is, you should look into it because FAC does a lot for faculty and the students in the community college system here in California. Its mission is to inform, educate, empower, and advocate for faculty and students. And so this particular thing today is being done by the FAC Part-Time Committee, which is there's a lot of committees in FAC. And so the Part-Time Committee is made up mostly of part-time faculty like myself. And we thought that this might be helpful because many part-time faculty, not everybody, but many part-time faculty are looking for a full-time position. And this might be one way to sort of find the ins and outs to do that sort of thing. And so the other thing is FAC also relies on members to get anything done. So it would be really helpful if you would, I'm sure there's somewhere in here where you can join FAC. It's painless and it's cheap. So you'd be doing yourself a favor because you'd have access to a lot of information you might need or want, and you'd be doing FAC a favor because they have your money. And so everybody's happy that way. So the next thing, so today, I already mentioned this sort of, but the next thing is the purpose of today's session is to focus on the application process, the interviews, especially to deal with the new buzzwords, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the teaching demos. And so the people who are going to be presenting today are all faculty members, full-time faculty members who have experience with hiring committees or recently became full-time faculty members, and they can talk about their experiences. And so before the whole thing starts, I guess, it'll be moderated by Linda Sneed, but before we get to her, I just wanted to briefly acknowledge Wendy Brill-Wynkoop, who is the president of FAC. She's here today sort of as an observer, and we appreciate her being here. And so the other thing is just as protocol, if you please stay muted, that would be really helpful so we don't have background noise. And we'll be taking breaks for questions as we get through each sort of subset of the hiring process. And there'll also be someone monitoring the chat. So if you have questions and you think you might forget them before the next break for questions, you can always throw them in the chat and then they'll be summarized when we get to the question thing, and we'll go from there. All right. So Wendy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy Brill-Wynkoop. I'm the president of FAC. I'm so happy to have you here tonight. I hope we can try and demystify some of the part-time to full-time hiring process for you. And I would really just want to give out a quick shout out to our staff members who are here tonight, Lydia and Herlim, who are helping manage all sorts of things behind the scenes. So thank you guys for your time. And I am going to turn it over to Linda Sneed, our amazing moderator, who's hopefully going to get us on track and moving along. I did post the presentation in the chat, and I'll post it again a little bit because I know the chat's busy. So if you need this presentation, you have a link to it and you're welcome to share and use it as you need. Linda?
Yes. All right. Thank you, Ray and Wendy. My name is Linda Sneed. I'm going to call myself a career part-timer. I've been teaching English part-time at Cosumnes River College up here in Sacramento in the Los Rios district since 2003. I thought that I wanted to be full-time, was a finalist several times, didn't get the job. And since 2005, I've kind of dedicated myself to being a part-timer and an advocate for part-time faculty interests. Also support those part-timers who want to become full-time. So love to be involved in this kind of event. We're going to allow each panelist to introduce themselves, and we're going to go in the order here. Presented here. And if I could just, before we go to introductions, remind everybody, if you're hearing my voice, will you please check to make sure that you are muted? I can see in our participants list that we have some folks whose microphones are on, and that may not pose a problem, but just in case, because we are recording and we want people to be able to make good use of this video later. So thank you very much. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself?
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Aleman. I am a full-timer at College of the Desert. I teach sociology, and I just got hired on this last fall. So I lived the adjunct life for about 2 years, and now I'm a full-timer. So today I'll be giving the perspective of an interviewee and what it's like to go through the process of, applying, onboarding, and all that stuff. So happy to be here.
Thanks, Andrew, for being here, and congratulations. Cornelia Alsheimer.
Yes, hello. I'm so delighted to have you all here. My name is Cornelia Alsheimer. I teach accounting at Santa Barbara City College. I was a part-timer for actually 12 years. And then I became hired into full-time position, but that's also already like almost 10 years ago. Since then, since I became full-time, I also was part of a number of hiring committees. So I will try to bring two perspectives, the one of a part-timer trying to get a full-time job and the one of a full-timer sitting in the hiring committees. And again, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mohamed.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mohamed Sharif-Idiris. I'm an assistant professor in cybersecurity at Southwestern College. Like Andrew, I just started full-time in the fall, so it's my second semester coming up. Mainly been in the corporate world working in cybersecurity, but looking forward to sharing my experience in the interview process, and happy to be here.
Thank you, Mohamed. Oranit.
Hi, everyone. Oranit Limmaneeprasert from American River College. I teach ESL. And I started at American River College in 2001. And because I was interested in serving as an equity representative on hiring committees, I have served on more than 20, I would say, maybe close to 30 committees now, but I would say at least more than 20 committees. I'm very happy to be here to share my experience serving on these committees. And doing everything I can to help you, prepare for your journey to the part-time, the full-time tenure track position. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Wendy Brill-Wynkoop again, still Wendy Brill-Wynkoop, still president of FAC, but I am also a full-time faculty member at College of the Canyons. I've been there, this is my 25th year as a full-time faculty member. I taught part-time for about 4 years before I became full-time. And I have sat on an enormous amount of full-time hiring committees. I have lost count, but hopefully some of my experience will benefit you guys in communicating it today. So you'll learn from us. Thank you for coming.
Brilliant. So it looks like we are ready for the next slide. So we're gonna, as you've seen in the chat and as has been announced, everyone has access to this presentation. So you'll be able to go back. If you haven't already seen this, you can go back and look at these slides. So rather than reading through the slides, we're really going to ask our panelists to offer us some useful information that goes beyond the bullet points. Wendy's going to start us off by talking us through the first several.
Oh yeah, a couple things that we have on our list just that not everybody might be aware of, but there are minimum qualifications for each discipline. And that is a link available that you can click and you will download the faculty minimum qualifications handbook. There are often a section in a job announcement where it'll say minimum quals, which is often copied and pasted right out of that handbook. And then it'll say desirables. And desirables are sort of the extra things that they're looking for to sort of tailor the position. So if you meet the minimum quals, you can apply for the position. And I know a lot of faculty who've read the minimum quals and then read the desirables and they go, oh, well, I'm not really who they're looking for, so I'm not going to apply. I would say if you meet the minimum qualifications, apply for the position. That's my rule of thumb. And often those minimum qualifications are pretty simple and you'll meet them. The other thing I want to encourage people to do is look at similar disciplines, because often you sort of pigeonhole yourself into one little narrow area. And you might meet several different disciplines with your educational background. For example, I have an MFA in photography, but I also met the minimum quals for digital media, which is really where I ended up in a media arts position. So often look at similar disciplines and similar job announcements for similar disciplines, not just maybe the one that you're used to teaching in. I don't know how many people on this call know about the CCC registry. The link again is provided there, but you can Google it, CCC registry, and it'll pop up. You can create an account, and then you can put in several different metrics that you're looking for that will send you announcements of jobs. Right now, there's something like 65 full-time tenure track positions available. I think Cornelia is going to talk about this in a little bit, but there are unprecedented amounts of full-time positions available at this moment in time, and there will be more coming. We had FAC lobbied very hard to get $100 million for new full-time faculty positions, and we've had a lot of retirements, so there's an enormous amount of full-time hiring this year and also next year. So make sure that you join the registry and you check off all the disciplines that you might be interested in. Another thing is reach out to networks, learn about other people at other colleges, because I just sent somebody a job announcement today for a position up north that I know that she'd be perfect for. So I think knowing people in your discipline or similar disciplines that can look out for jobs and let you know that jobs are coming will give you a little longer time to prepare. And then the other thing that I think is always helpful is send resumes out to not just through the hiring application process, but also try and stay connected to department chairs in schools that you might be interested in teaching in. I have been a department chair. Actually, I'm not now because I'm doing FAC presidency, but I was a department chair for 20 plus years. And I always received resumes, and just seeing that person's name over and over again and being able to sort of skim their resume and see how they grow really does help me know who they are. So sometimes you don't hear back from them, but now you can email out resumes. So I would use that as a point of contact over and over again with lots of different schools, particularly if you're in a more urban area where there are several different schools that you can teach at. The last thing I was just going to mention on this slide is we are 73 different districts. So it is impossible to assume that because LACCD does it one way, that Los Rios is going to do it the same way. We do it 73 different ways. And we'll probably come up with that tonight, where some of us will sort of counter each other and say, wait a minute, no, we don't do it that way. And we did that just planning this, this panel. So there are policies and procedures on campus, board policies and procedures. They're usually listed under 7120. Not every college district uses that same numbering system, but most of them do. And if you read that, you can read through the process. So it's actually written down. And it's important to know what the process will be at the institution that you're applying to. And that will help you know that there are supposed to be processes that are supposed to keep everything fair and equal among all the applicants. And that process should be transparent. And if something's off, you need to call HR and have a conversation with them to make sure they know that you're aware of the process. Just one example, at College of the Canyons, unless an application's complete, we can't even look at the person. So the committee's not even going to see the applicant. And I can't tell you how many applicants after the process is over have called me and said, why didn't you consider me? And I said, I didn't even know you applied. So make sure you know what that process is. Contact HR, make sure they know that you're applying, make sure all your documents are there when they're supposed to be there. And that will make sure that you are in the running for the position. I think that's all I had to say about this slide, Linda. Thanks.
Okay, great. So next, Oranit is going to talk with us a little bit. I'm sorry, Cornelia is going to talk to us about scheduling. Go ahead. Or screening, rather.
Could you go one slide back, please? Or Helen, could you go one slide back? I think, Linda, you were a little bit too fast for me. Sorry.
No, I'm not controlling the slides. So
I got one question. Can I ask a question?
Actually, we were planning to hold questions until the end, just to
Okay.
make sure that we can really get you all the information and the expertise before we take questions. So take it away, Cornelia.
Yes, thank you so much. And I would like to tag on to what Wendy just said at the very end, how important it is to have all your requirements, all the requirements complete, specifically all the documents. And I would like to go all the way back to the very first one, the minimum qualifications. Just talking from my own experience, all my degrees, everything I had was from Germany, and not necessarily this matches up with the minimum qualifications that are like listed in the MQ handbook from the Chancellor's office. So if that could be the case for you, there is a way out, and that's called equivalency. So if you feel you have the qualifications and for example, your certificates and your degree is from a foreign country, or you have a comparable degree, I would always try to go the route for equivalency. And usually what you have to do is you just submit your documents, but you also have to write a letter of equivalency and explain to them, why is the stuff that I have matching up with the MQs that are required for this job. And this both is very important. Not only send in your certificates, but also write a letter of equivalency and explain to them why you are meeting those MQs with the documents you have. The other bullet point I would like to talk about is the selection committee that you will be facing. And Wendy said she has been on numerous ones. I have been on a few. It's usually very heavily for faculty position. Most of the members will be faculty, and it depends again on the college. As Wendy said, there's 73 different ways to do things. How many people there are on? Usually I have seen committees between 5 and 7. Again, the majority are faculty. Mostly there will be faculty for the area that you are applying. So I teach accounting. So we had in our committee 3 accounting teachers, and then we had 1 faculty member from outside accounting, depending who was available, and who I thought I had one time a math faculty for an accounting position, or also an academic counselor is also sometimes a good choice, even if it's an instructional faculty, or if it's a counseling position or another educational support division, then for sure you have more educational support, and then some people from the instructional area. There's usually the administrator in the committee is usually the dean, the area dean, and staff members are most of the time a note taker, or the EEO representative, human resources, often appoints a person who is sitting in the committee and makes sure all the equal employment opportunity rules are followed. Yeah, and just as a last note, because Wendy said I wanted to say some words about how many positions there are actually out there. There are hundreds. Like, this is the year to kind of really go for it, go into these hiring processes prepared. So Santa Barbara is hiring 10, which is a lot for us. I heard that Santa Rosa College is hiring 30, Southwestern 37, Long Beach 40 positions, right? Just these are the numbers I know of these 4 colleges. There are many, many positions out there. So I think this is a very good chance this year.
Thank you so much, Cornelia. Oranit is going to talk with us about the screening process and screening criteria.
Hi, so this is the sample screening criteria that the administrators, our last VP of instruction, shared with us. And when we run our employment workshop on my campus, we would use this. So basically, the committee would get together to decide how they would screen in the first round. And so in that case, they normally would go to the job announcement and look at all the important, desired, required qualifications and say, okay, we need to have these items in our criteria when we screen the applications. And so here you can see a lot of them are pretty standard: education, experience, diversity, and I would say diversity and equity at this time, because this is a sample screening set of items that we have been using for a while now. And technology is definitely very important. And as you can see here, sometimes people also pay attention to whether or not your application is, complete, and I will touch on that a little bit. And so I would say when you go, when people screen the applications, again, you see the sample points here. That again is, not always the same. It depends on what the committee feel. How sometimes they feel that a certain item should weigh more, and that would be the committee decision. Just so you know too, on some campuses, there is what we call, in Los Rios at least, we have an equity representative on every hiring committee. I mentioned this earlier that I served as the equity representative on many, many hiring committees. And so as the screening criteria are developed, the equity representative would definitely make sure that everything is equitable and that would not be biased against anyone. I think when we look at this, you can see that number 3, diversity and equity, seem to be by itself, but it is not by itself. And this was developed a while ago. Let's make sure that when we get to that part, I know there were some questions. When we get to that part, there will be more information that we'll discuss. I think when you work on your CV and all that, which someone will talk about this, keep in mind, these items, some of them are really standing items: experience, education, diversity and equity, technology, experience, they're always there. It just, they may be asked differently or in different ways. Next
Great.
slide, please. Thank you.
Can I mention something really quick? Sorry, just jump in here. One of the things, like I just, to get an understanding of it, sometimes we have 100 people applying for one job, and I'll have a packet of 25, 30 pieces of paper that I have to go through and fill out that screening criteria. And I'm like scouring the 30 pages to see if somebody has, say, technology experience. So I have to, in order to fill out that criteria, I'm trying to give you points. I'm looking for evidence. And often that criteria comes from the job announcement. And I'm like, I'm a detective trying to find it. And I love a good application packet. I don't have to look for stuff. It just sort of like lands in my lap. So when you guys have all this amazing breadth of experience, make sure that you include it, and include it in several different places. Include it in your resume, include it in your letter of intent, include it in your application. It seems redundant, but it's much easier for those of us who have to screen hundreds and hundreds of applications. It's much easier for us to be able to give you points for all that amazing experience and skill that you have. So make it easy for us screeners.
Well, that's a great segue to talk about the application process and the different components of the application. You just mentioned, Wendy, why don't you continue talking about the job announcement and how important it is to really study that thing and build your application and function of it.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Rookie mistake. Can go ahead and go forward a slide, Herlam. So the job announcement, we have some examples for you, and I don't know if I'm the only one to speak on this, but I would love help on it too after I give my piece. But I would definitely look at lots of examples of job announcements. Again, you can also go to the registry, the CCC registry, and link to another 65 some positions. Read the job announcement. I would print it out. I would go through and highlight and mark and circle all the things it's asking for. That's your guideline for your application. And I have seen so many applications where somebody is applying to 4 or 5 schools and they're just handing me a generic packet. And that's not the person I'm looking for. I'm looking for the person who read my job announcement and really wants to come work at College of the Canyons and really is sort of delivering to me what we've asked for on that job announcement. So I think that often we're so busy, we're trying to teach at 10 different places and manage our families and, you know, learn the new technology. And this is another thing on your plate, and it's so time consuming, but it's really important to go through that job announcement and then read it in detail to know specifically who they're looking for and what kind of position it is. Just don't assume because it says tenure track in English that they're all the same in all different institutions.
If I may add something here, Linda, I would say, you know, I totally agree with Wendy. I think make it easy for the committee to see all the wonderful experiences and qualifications that you have. It is very crucial. And I think here, nowadays, I know in our district, when we post a job announcement, it's long, it's huge, but there is a big part that talks about the institution. I think that gives you a clue as to what you should focus on, because people take the time. I'm telling you, in our district, we had several forums, several retreats to just work on what should we talk about when we post our job announcement, and we want to be welcoming and make sure that people want to work in Los Rios. So we took a lot of time to look at that, wanting people to know what kind of institutions we are. And I think that if you have that information in the job announcement, please, you know, read very carefully and address and see what the trend is. We'll see whether or not it's a place you want to work at. And if it is, then focus on all the important points in the information about the institution, in addition to, of course, looking, you know, finding information online at the college website.
Yes, and if I can add to what Wendy and Oranit said, you know, I used the job announcement when I was applying as well, and it will be your best friend. Honestly, it gives you insight into what the college is looking for and for that particular position. And I use that as well for my interview preparation as well, just to kind of understand, you know, how I can prepare for the particular role. The job announcement laid out a lot of the information that I needed for my preparation.
I would like to add from my own experience. When I applied for my full-time position now, I had actually somebody help me with this, who kind of guided me saying, hey, look through every line, pretty much what Wendy said at the beginning, look through every line in that job announcement and highlight it, and then make sure all these desired qualifications are reflected somewhere in your paperwork, probably mostly in your letter of intent, but also in your CV, for example, you know, what you want to highlight. And that is very important. I wanted to also say a few words about this job announcement at Santa Barbara City College for our biological science faculty. This is just one example for our new approach to hiring job announcements. We are trying to increase diversity in our full-time faculty. So if you look at this, you will see that there is a very high emphasis on desirable qualifications that have to do with experience and your approach to diversity and equity and inclusion, which might not be the case at other institutions. But again, if look at these job announcements as your guide to what should be in your letter of intent.
Thank you, everyone. I think we know what the next slide to be able to talk about your letter. Super important. Andrew, do you want to talk to us about this first?
All right, this is me. Okay, so aside from all the great information on the slide, I'm going to tell you a little bit of what I think was most important for me in the letter of intent. So in this is where you're selling yourself. This is where you are telling the committee, this is why you need me. The key that I was taught on this is this quick thing. How does your previous experience, how is that going to make that an easy transition for you into this institution? Always tie into your experience and why you are that fit. That is most important. But another thing, and especially as hearing Wendy's presentation about her having to hunt, you want to make sure that your letter of intent or this letter, it's easy on the eyes. Make sure that it's organized. So when I did my letter of intent, I actually broke this down into 4 sections. So it was just, you know, the general, like, my name is Andrew Aleman and I would like to apply for blah, blah, blah. So that's your opening paragraph. Your next paragraph would be, or your next section would be you talking about your education and training. What experience do you have? What degrees do you have that is going to, you know, make you a good fit? Section 2 on this would be your teaching philosophy. What is your teaching philosophy in a quick summary of what you do and how you do it? The next section is going to be instruction and curriculum development. So tie in what you do and also what experience have you had at your institutions that you could bring over. So if you've helped develop a course, what classes have you teach? How do you teach them? That is imperative. Now, going back to what they said about the job announcement, all that information there, if you have that experience, write it in there, fit it in. Oh, you're looking for a sociologist who knows how to teach gender. At East Los Angeles College, I taught gender for 3 years. Tie that in. Lastly, I would say is your university services and your professional associations. So tie in any services that you've had. Like, for instance, for mine, I talked about how I was the chair of the sociology club and how I helped out students, you know, in that. And then, you know, professional associations. Are you a member of the American Sociological Association? Are you a member of, as you all should be, the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges? Do you have a role? Are you going to try to get onto a committee and help us out? So talk about your experience, and in this, really sell yourself on why you're the easiest transition into this position. All right, that's me.
Can I add something?
Absolutely.
So after you've screened hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applications, this is my wish, that the only thing I ever have to read in all those applications is a letter of intent. That is what I think is a good letter of intent. Somebody asked in the chat, do I need one if they don't ask for it? Yes. Every application should have it. And what it does is it just makes it so easy for us screeners. It shows us you've read that job announcement, you've dissected it, and you're like, here you are, here I am, I'm your person, and you want me. And then I just read that letter and I'm like, boom, there's my person. I want to see him. I want to meet him. I want to interview him. That's what the letter intent should do for your faculty screeners, right? That want to meet you. That's the whole point of screening, is to get an interview. And if the letter of intent is well written, yes, it can be way more than one page, but if it's well written, it reads like a novel. It's quick. I love it. I fall in love with the person and I want to meet them. Thanks, Linda.
Yeah, I think Cornelia had some things to say too.
Yeah, there's so many good things already said about the letter, but if you basically add everything together, what you just heard, the one conclusion you clearly can make is you need to write a new letter for each position. If you are applying for more than one position, even if it's at the same college, but definitely if you are applying for different positions at different colleges, there needs to be a new letter. The screening committees realize if you basically do a one-size-fits-all approach, and that is never a good thing. So sit down and make sure you tailor your letter to the exact college, to that exact position that you are applying for. It's a lot of work. It totally is, but it's worth it. Thanks.
And before we move to the next slide, I didn't plan to offer much other than my moderating skills, such as they are. But I want to throw in one more thing as a writing instructor, which is you are doing yourself a massive favor if you ask trusted colleagues to read your letter, look at your materials, put themselves in the position of someone who's read 90 of these, and ask for honest feedback. Did this compel you? Is this interesting? Is there anything that could hit the cutting room floor? Treating this as a piece of writing that is super important, and putting not just the time in yourself, but test drive it. Like we recommend that our students do in working on papers. I think that that's going to serve you so well. So resume or CV, Wendy had some things to talk about here, and any of our panelists who want to jump in, please do so after Wendy.
Yeah, I see a lot of resumes that are the one page. Like if you Google, what should my resume be? You get this corporate one page, you have a goal at the top, you can't go more than one page, you should list your most recent experience, and that's it. A CV, an academic CV, is not that. It's everything but that. We welcome detail, and the more detail you can provide to show your experience and skill, I think the better chance you have, again, at when we're going through screening criteria and trying to give you those points so we can meet you, we need to see it. So I think we tried to provide a list here of the things that maybe you haven't thought about, but often you even have, one of the things I was thinking about after we did this is often you even have like community work, we have volunteer work, but often you'll do community work where you might do something that's related to teaching, and you just don't even think about putting it on there. If anybody on the call here is in the career education area, you have to be a little more creative with that academic resume and think about, when have you been in connections with people where you've mentored them or you've taught them how to do something, or maybe it's more of a demo or seminar style as opposed to an actual face-to-face classroom. Those of you who've been teaching for a long time have that teaching resume built out, but you have to think about everything that might be relevant to the college. How do you know? Again, you go back to that job announcement, you read it in detail, you might read it 10 times, but you want to find ways that you can show in your resume that you do have experience. Maybe it's not exactly the experience that they're looking for or the skill they're looking for, but you have to sort of show in your resume how you can connect that. Like, I've done this, but I've just done it in a different place or format. But definitely longer is not necessarily better, but I have had so many people who have just had that one page. I know where they get it. They get it from a Microsoft template, and they do themselves a disservice in an academic setting when we're really looking for a lot more information about who you are as an individual. I've had questions like, do you put the education at the top? I think it's usually the education short and sweet, so I would put it at the top. I've had people who put it all the way at the bottom, and then it's, again, I'm kind of looking for it for minimum qualifications. Usually minimum quals are based on your highest educational degree, so I would put that at the top. And then I've had questions about technology, and we had it earlier in the chat, like, well, what kind of technology? I think, you know, we have gone online, whether we liked it or not, because of COVID, and clearly we keep going back online, whether you like it or not, because of COVID. So technology is part of our world. And I think it's important that if you can give us more detail about your experience in teaching online and using technology to teach, again, that shows us the more versatility you have, the more skills you have, the more experience you have, the easier it is going to be evaluate you to see if you're a good fit for the position. I'm sure I forgot something, but I'll stop there.
But I think Mohamed was going to talk a bit here too. Mohamed, do you want to add?
Sure. Yeah. So I agree with most of what Wendy mentioned in that, you know, from the corporate environment, you're kind of taught to keep it one page. But, you know, speaking to some of my colleagues that were in the community college district, it allowed me to expand on that and to, you know, use more than one page, but to include a lot of those key components. And a lot of the expertise that I had was outside the classroom as well. So, you know, any, you know, mentorships that you've done, include that in the resume as well.
That's great.
Linda, may I add something here?
Of course.
So I would say this, if you have, you know, a PhD or an EDD, I would say you might want to do some research as to whether or not that is something that is desirable. Just so you know, sometimes the committee would say, we want someone with a PhD, but there are people who say, nope, we just want someone with a master's, that's all it takes. And so if you do have a PhD, and if you find out more about what the institution or the committee is looking for, it can be really helpful, because I have seen applications of people who have taught at four-year research university, and they just have pages and pages and pages of their publications. Now, that would be very impressive at a four-year research, you know, university where you would teach graduate students, right? Master's or PhD students. But if a community college, the department is hiring, is not interested in publications, you give people the impression that you are not someone who's interested in teaching. And you might not, you know, be the one they would pick. And so I would say, be a little, you know, do some research about this, connect with someone and see whether or not you want to include a lot of publications. I would say many people, and I'm saying this because I do have a PhD and I do have a research focus in my background, but I know when I apply for a position at American River College, I didn't have to emphasize that, because that's, you know, American River College focuses on teaching. Thank you.
There have been some really great questions in the chat, some of which have been addressed, but I think we want to keep moving on to our next slide is on references. And Mohamed wanted to talk to us about letters. I'm sorry, references, which are letters.
Sure. Yeah. So, you know, references are important. So make sure you let them know that you are applying for a role, and they do call them. I believe my department chair contacted most of my references. So make sure you let them know that you are applying for the role. And, you know, share your resume with highlights of your qualifications, and make sure it's recent and dated as well. and that is specific to the position. So with, what I tried to do with the references that I had were colleagues that knew my teaching capability, and also colleagues from the corporate environment that knew my expertise in cybersecurity. So you can have a combination of those.
Okay, great. Does anyone from the panel want to add anything on references? What particularly maybe you as a committee member, a selection committee member look for, or what are red flags versus green flags? Wendy, and then
Yeah.
Cornelia.
I think I've read letters that it's obvious that the person doesn't really know the applicant. So I think it's important to maintain your relationships with who is going to write your application references. If you're going to be applying now, I would start calling people right now and make sure you send them a copy of your resume so that they can point to specific details about who you are and what you're doing. Have a conversation with them. I have people who ask me to write them letters of reference, and I will personally say, I don't think I'm the best person to write it. That means that I don't feel comfortable writing somebody a letter of reference. So a generic letter of reference does not do you any good. Make sure it's a specific letter to that specific position. Sometimes people will say, if you write it, I'll sign it. If you're going to do that, make sure you're somebody who can boast about yourself, right? Because I've had people say that, and I don't think I can write myself a letter of recommendation. I'm just not that kind of person. So they're very important. And I have had committee members, hold one up and say, I don't want to interview this person because of, and they point to a letter of reference. And sometimes I don't think the applicants even really know sometimes what are in those letters. They haven't read them with detail, or they're just so generic they could be about anybody. So they're important. Get your relationships with those people who are going to write those letters. Talk to them about the letters. Give them bullet points that you want them to include, and make sure they're really sound, because you want them to shine for you.
And if I may add something here, I would say, if it is a teaching position, I would, invite someone on my campus to observe me, and then someone who would be my reference, because again, when people have seen you teach, they have more to say about you as a teaching faculty member. So I think a lot of us kind of shy away from observations, but I really think that can be really, really helpful. In fact, that's what I did before I applied for the full-time position at American River College in 2001. I had my department chair, who later became a dean and now college president, to observe me and write up, an observation. And then later she became my reference as well. And it's very, very helpful, because then people have seen you teach, have seen you do the job, not just I think or I understand, but I have witnessed something wonderful.
I would like to add just an example which may work for you depending on who you are and what references you want to provide. Sometimes it is a good idea to have a reference that is a little bit out of the box. After I applied, I was told that the one reference reference letter the committee really liked was from my AYSO commissioner for having done years of referee work for the soccer kids, which for sure was not exactly related to an accounting job, while it still had something to do with pedagogy, right? And instruction when I helped the kids learn soccer. But it was something that not everybody had. So if you have a reference that is a little bit out of the box, if one of these of your references could be something like that, add it. It can't harm.
That's great. Thank you so much. Would anyone like to speak to, because this question has come up in the chat a few times, and I have a feeling a lot of people would like to know your thoughts on this. Who, if you can generalize or point out specifics even, actually, for who would be inappropriate and who we might not think of, but could actually be very valuable, like our colleagues, for example, would asking a fellow instructors just to observe us and attest to how we operate with students, would that be appropriate?
For a letter of,
To write a letter. Mhm.
yeah. So a couple, I was trying to answer a couple questions in the chat in between. First of all, if somebody's on a selection committee, like if I'm sitting on the hiring committee, typically people on the hiring committee cannot write a letter. And if somebody has, like I've been on a hiring committee and I've written a letter for another position, and then they'll be interviewing for us at College of the Canyons, and then they put the letter in, and our HR will just take it out, and then they don't have all the materials. So you have to be careful about that. Somebody asked, could the letter be from somebody at the same institution? Yes. But I would also say, and this is based, a lot of what Cornelia was saying, you need some creativity. You also need some difference in those letters. So let's say you work for a large English department. I'm just going to say Los Rios, large English department. All three of your letters are from 3 English faculty who are not on the hiring committee. I would say you need some variety. So one of the things that I think you could look for is students are great. If you know a student who's a good writer and can write you a great letter of recommendation, that's an awesome one. I worked with somebody at an ad agency before I went full-time who wrote an amazing letter for me. So I think industry are great letters. And I would definitely try and not only have a variety of people, but try and get them to talk about different things that you have in terms of your skills. Like maybe one focuses on your sensitivity to diversity and culturally responsive teaching, and another one your organizational skills, and another one your teaching skills, right? And maybe even, and if they only ask for 3, you can turn in 4 or 5, right? You can turn in more than that. So hopefully that answers. And then, so one other thing, somebody said, what's the difference between references and letter of recommendations? Usually the letter, some districts, a lot have changed this process, but a lot of districts still ask for physical letters of recommendation or PDFs of them, right? So that would be an actual letter. And references are on almost every job application. You're putting in, maybe 2 to 4 references. And depending on the local process, those references are called at some point. Usually they don't call them unless you make it to a longer, further out in the process, like second interview, because there's just not time to call hundreds and hundreds of references. So, but if you're going to put a reference down and you make it to like a second level interview, that's when you want to call your references and say, I'm applying for a job. I've been a reference, and people call me and say, I'm checking references on Oranit, and I'm like, I don't even know who that is, right? So that's really bad. You want your references to be prepped, that if they're going to call, they know who you are and what you've been doing lately, and that you're applying and that you really want the job, like, so your reference can sell you. Right?
I have to say, I totally agree with Wendy in terms of, if you list someone as your reference and you get to the second round, please prep your reference for that. Don't surprise them.
That seems like great advice, and I think we've managed to address a significant number of the questions in the chat on this. So I think we are ready to move on to the next slide, though, and the next portion of this, which is about interview preparation. And just remember, we intend to have time at the end for questions and answers. So if there are things that didn't get addressed, there will be time for that, we promise. So interview preparation, we want to ask Mohamed and Cornelia, I think, to talk to us about this.
Sure. So yeah, I went through the interview process around this time last year, February, March time period. And I think preparation is key and very important, right? So do your research about the college and the department. And, speaking to what Wendy mentioned earlier about the job announcement, use that as a way to create sample questions So what I did was I created sample questions from that job announcement, and I asked some of my colleagues, so 4 of them, to do a mock interview with me. And if you're not a good interviewer like myself, mock interview can help you prepare for that as well. And ask them to give you an honest feedback from that interview, and make sure that you take notes on that, and then conduct a second mock interview after that, maybe 2 weeks later, and to go through 11 or 12 questions just as you would. And we'll have some sample interview questions a little bit later in the presentation. But that process really helped me personally, and I think it would help you as well. Do at least 1 or 2 mock interviews with community college colleagues or any other colleagues that you may have, and have some of those preparation sample questions. And then, once you get that feedback, do a follow-up, and hopefully, by the time you do get your real interview, you'll be a lot prepared.
I would totally second that. Practice interviewing with colleagues. If you don't have anyone, practice with your kids. Practice with your spouse. Just make sure you practice. I really think this is key. I can't, like, Mohamed is so, I can only agree with him on that one. There's one topic, and I believe one bullet point, I think I put that in: pre-write answers for questions that you anticipate. So a couple of slides later, we have a bunch of sample questions for you. For sure, nobody knows what you will be asked, but there are a few things that you can anticipate, and that is when you do the research that Mohamed just mentioned about the department, about the college. So you get probably a feeling where they are, what activities they have, so that you can prepare for them. And again, also the job announcement is a great hint giver on what they will ask you, and then write your answers down. Do it in writing. So for my interview, I actually wrote that down and then kind of tried to memorize. Learn it by heart. So especially for me as a non-native speaker, right? English is my second language. That was really helpful for me to keep my answers fluent, because there's a lot of stress in that 45-minute interview. The stress level is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And if you have kind of already sentences, words in your head that you just have to kind of that come easy to you because you have set them in your mind 100 times, that helps.
I would like to add one piece here. In this day and age, when you have Zoom interviews, I think most of us have Zoom interviews now. Please don't, and if you have the questions, maybe 10 minutes before the interview, 20 minutes before the interview, or even a few days before the interview, please print the questions out, and then do exactly what Cornelia, Mohamed said in terms of write down the main points that you want to elaborate on, that you want to focus on. I have seen high-level interviews of administrators where people said, "Oh, sorry, can you read the question again? I don't remember it." That really is a clue to people that the candidate might not have taken it seriously, or might not have been very organized, that the person doesn't have the questions in front of her. I think it's a very simple thing to do. Just print the interview questions if you have them in advance, or the teaching demo description if you have it in advance.
Great. And for those who maybe joined after, not only are we sharing the recording next week, but the slide deck has been made available in the chat, but you may not be able to access it if you joined after it was shared in the chat. So I'm sure that's going to show up. You'll see a Google Doc link in the chat again soon. I think unless anyone wants to jump in here, we're ready to move to the next slide to talk about the first level interview. Yes, there we go. So Wendy, I think you're going to kick this off.
Yeah, great. So I'm just going to say two things about the interview prep. Well, three. Sorry, I'm sorry, Linda. So we didn't say it out loud, but I'm sorry, that's my dog. She has to bark because I'm on a Zoom call, right? So it's really important to dress appropriately. I know that seems simple to a lot of people, but I can't tell you how many people came in like jeans and a t-shirt. It's a full-time position, tenure track position. And if you're on Zoom, you only have to do like waist up. So like put on, Donna, I'm on the phone. So it's really important to dress appropriately. And, you know, if you really want the position, appearances make a difference. And what is appropriate, I would just say, you know, I've seen all different crazy styles and I love them. I love the creativity, but it shows me when somebody has tried, right, to clean up and look professional for the interview. I think that's fairly obvious. And then definitely writing notes is super important. And Oranit said that, but you know, make notes as you're thinking about stuff so you don't forget it. I love the 3 rule when I'm going through questions. I like to have 3 things to talk about so that I at least have 3 things to jog my memory. The story I wanted to tell really quick in terms of prep going into the interview is I had my first full-time interview that I had. I bombed it. It was horrible. I literally left crying hysterically. It was at Mount Sac. I've never said that out loud to anybody, so I don't know if anybody remembers it, but it was horrible. And I called my brother Matt. And the reason I called my brother Matt is because he worked for this large financial company. And all he did all day was interview people constantly. And so I called him and I said, what do I need to do? And he said, first of all, go get this book. He called it Knock 'em Dead. And it had generic interview questions. Even though it wasn't for education, it had the structure of general interview questions. He made me read the book. And then he drilled me on the questions. And he practiced and practiced and practiced with me. The next time I went for interviews, I got 4 first level interviews and I ended up getting second level interviews for all 4. And I really do think the difference was practice. I don't think I was that much better of a person. My resume hadn't changed, nothing changed. It was just practice. So please practice. It's really important. The first level interview is about, can you do the job? That's the first level. Can you do the job? We'll talk about the second level in a minute, and that's if you're a good fit for the institution. But this is mostly faculty interviewing you, and they really want to know if you can do the job. And where I've seen pitfalls, often people don't manage their time well. So you'll hear something like, you know, welcome, we have 1 hour for this interview, and we have 20 questions plus your teaching demo. And you really have to calculate in your head, okay, I've got like a minute a question, or I've got 3 minutes a question. You really have to, and if you're not sure, well, is that an hour plus 20 minutes for the teaching demo, or do I have to include the teaching? Ask, because it's really important that you don't go over time, because usually we have to stop the interview. The reason we have to do that is we're supposed to treat everybody exactly the same. That means that one candidate should not have 1 hour and 20 where another has 1 hour, right? So everybody gets the same amount of time, gets the same set of questions. Sometimes there's follow-up, but usually it's the same set of questions. So it's important that you manage your time. Now with that, we're often the selection committee is sort of a bunch of robots asking the same questions. And then we want you to think about your style. We want to see somebody who would be great in front of a group of students. So are you approachable? Are you knowledgeable? Do you have, can you use specific examples of equity in the classroom? And that's probably one of the hardest things for people to do. They often say, well, community colleges are diverse. Of course, I'm used to community colleges, but to be able to tell a story and be specific about how you approach diversity in the classroom is really important. Be authentic, be personable, right? We want to know that you are somebody that is not a cookie cutter, but that you are an individual, you have creativity. Sorry, I was trying to see what else I was trying to remember to say. And even though it's set up as this, generic questions being fired at you, if you can try and make it more conversational in your response, at the same time answering all the questions. I have the pitfalls that I see are people run out of time. They don't answer the questions thoroughly. They assume, especially internal candidates will assume that the committee knows who they are and what they're doing. And so they don't answer the questions thoroughly. They might use an acronym, or they might use, say English 110 instead of the actual English composition. And so sometimes people on the committee might be outside of the department or might be an administrator and not know what they're talking about. So be sure that you're answering it thoroughly. If you're internal, this is really, really hard to do, because you might be trying to sell yourself to the person who's essentially been your boss and your colleague for the last 10 years.
Linda, may I add something here?
Of course.
Yeah. I see that the fifth bullet point said incorporate conversational elements. I would say, normally when you go to an interview, the chair would tell you what the format of the interview is. In Los Rios, where we have, even though we're the second largest and we are trying to be, more friendly to candidates at this time, in the name of equity, in the name of treating everyone exactly the same way, we don't incorporate conversational elements. So we ask the same questions and we don't really, interact like a conversation. And so I would say because I have seen some candidates who wanted to do that. So you might want to just listen to the chair when the chair explains how the interview will be. Normally, in our district, the chair would say, we don't answer follow-up questions. We don't do X, Y, and Z. We'll take notes and don't worry if we don't make eye contact with you, it's because we're taking notes, but we don't really interact with the interviewee the way normal conversation is. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that this is what some, as we said earlier, there are so many districts, 73 districts in California. We do things differently. So it's a good idea to research and find out how to do this. And I think the other thing that Wendy touched on is kind of hard, and we will go to, insider pitfalls, is that sometimes it's not very helpful to approach certain people in such a informal way, because then you put them in a very uncomfortable situation, because they need to make sure that they don't show that they favor you. Thank you.
Would any of the panelists like to add anything about first level interview before we move to kind of quickly run through some sample questions, which again, you'll have access to in the slide deck if you haven't already.
Andrew, did you have something you wanted to say, or you wanted to hold off?
For time purposes, I'll just hold off.
Okay, how about we move to the next slide then? So we have 3 slides of some questions. Oranit, do you want to say anything about more than what you've already said about these questions?
Yeah. So I would say for number one, a lot of people make it so mechanical and they just go through the motion. I think if you can make it about you, what is unique about you, what makes you the perfect person for the job, instead of just going through the motion, it would make like Wendy, mentioned, interview committees, would be in the room for us. We would interview up to 15 people. And it's 55 minutes per person plus 5-minute break, or 45 minutes plus some break. Basically, we would be in that room 2 full days. And so if everyone just goes through the motion, it really is very hard on the committee. If you can just focus on what makes you, outstanding for that position. Talk about your personal background. And one thing that I would say is, even though it might be old information, if you attended that particular community college, or if you attend a community college, bring it up, because again, it shows that you understand our students. as a student, you have firsthand experience. Basically, the questions, and very soon we're going to go to the other slides, are basically, for our low students anyway, they're pretty much the same. There's always a question about your education, training, and background. There's always a question about technology. There's always a question at the end that you can add some information. There's always a question about equity. And there's always a question about something in your subject area, where the subject experts would judge you or would evaluate as to if your information is accurate. And there's always a teaching demo. And so it's, when you prepare, it is very, how do I put it? It's pretty straightforward as to how to prepare your how to answer interview questions. And there's always, a classroom. If it's a teaching position, there's always a classroom situation. If it's a counseling position, I know that in our district, counselors also teach, study skills classes. And so they also have questions about, a situation in a classroom or a situation in counseling. And one thing that it's kind of like very, annoying in my opinion, is that there is not a question that asks, why do you want to work at our campus? But the committee wants to hear that. Just so you know, I kept hearing people say, well, this person gives so much information, but why does this person want to teach here? Tell us. And so if there's a way you can put it in question number 1 as to why you want to teach at that institution, I think that would be really, really helpful, because it's not explicit, but they want to hear from you. The other piece that I would say is that I know for part-time faculty, it's really hard to find time to perform any service, I would say. But if you have any, or if you have volunteer work or anything, do insert that into question number 1. And I think very soon you're going to see too that equity is in everything. So integrate equity in every answer possible, because equity is not only in one question, even though it's only one question. The committee expects to hear how you apply your understanding or your practice of equity on your job, whether or not you're a non-classroom or classroom faculty.
And we have a whole slide on that, by the way. Do you want to move forward? If we could advance the slide, there
Sure.
are some more questions. I don't know if there's anything specific you want to say about these additional.
Can I mention something really
Of
quick
course.
about the previous one? The number 1 question, which almost everybody asks, every college asks, I just want to say again, if I haven't said it enough times, I've just read 100 applications. I don't even remember who you are. And I have people at number 1, we ask, tell us about yourself. And they say, well, you've read my application. And then that's it. They stop talking. And I'm like, oh my God, I just read 100 applications. I don't even remember who you are. That is a really important, do not assume anybody in that room remembers anything about you in the interview at all.
That's a really good point, because if you teach English, on my campus, American River College, whenever people ask for an equity representative for a hiring committee, I don't raise my hand. Why? Because normally it's more than 200 applications for one position. And so, and when I applied for my job in 2001, I was told that there were 155 applicants for the job. Well, they were hiring 3 positions, but so yeah, I definitely agree with Wendy. They're not going to remember when they read 200 or 250 applications when they get to you. So yeah, Linda, I think let's go to
next
the
slide.
next slide. Yes.
Thank you. So more examples. I think number 10 here, I know this has been mentioned, but when interviewees are given the opportunity to ask questions, I would assume that you would not want to squander that opportunity. You wouldn't want to say, no, I think I'm good. What kinds of questions might people want to ask the interview committee, or what would be considered maybe inappropriate versus appropriate to ask?
Let me start here. I would say that you definitely want to do some research about the institution, about the department, look at their class schedule, because that can tell you about what's going on in the department. Look at the student population, ask questions that are very specific about the department or the institution, because that shows that you are really interested in the job and in doing a good job. So I would go there. But just so you know, on my campus, some committees would decide not to rank number 10. But of course, there's no way you will know. So quite a few committees that I served on don't rank number 10, don't include, we don't give points there.
Anything anyone want to, Wendy, do you have anything, or others who've been on 8,000 hiring committees? Any vivid examples of good and bad questions to ask your committee?
I was not on 1,000 hiring committees, but on a few. So, and I just wanted to add that it is important that you do take the time to fully answer the question. If you are at the end of the 10, 15, or 20 questions, whatever they give you, and then there's like only half an hour over, then there's a problem with the way you answered the questions. So yes, you should not run over the time, but you also should make sure you are adding enough information to fill the time that you have. So don't be too brief. Don't be too scared and say, hey, I don't want to talk too much. Just yes, watch the time, but also if there's things you want to say to this question, make sure you say them.
I do realize there's something I wanted to add. I think I'm trying to say it's number 9, and that's the outside of a full-time position is not just teaching. And this is where I have seen a lot of internal part-time candidates who are unbelievable teachers not do as well in an interview, is that there is lots to do besides teaching. And I highly recommend that if you can participate in any opportunities on a campus to get involved and understand how the campus works and what full-time faculty do, that gives you the ability to put it on your resume and show that you have experience in it. But even if you haven't, the question about sort of number 9 about how you're going to be a full-time participate in the greater college is really important. And I've had, like I said, phenomenal part-time teachers who just really what's communicated to us as a hiring committee is I'm coming and I'm going to teach and I'm going to do an awesome job teaching, and then I'm going to go home. And not, I don't understand what committee work is, and I'm not interested in the Senate, and I don't really, I'm not interested in what the department does. And when we need full-time faculty, we need full-time faculty to help with all that crazy workload of everything outside of the classroom too. So it's really important to make sure that you can communicate to the hiring committee how you're going to fit into the department, to the faculty as a body, and to the college, and your understanding of that.
Maybe we're ready to go to the next slide.
Yes.
And Oranit, I think you and several others wanted to talk about this. The concept of equity has come up in several comments. It's also shown up in the chat. So take it away.
Yes, thank you. So I teach ESL, and our classroom is just so diverse, and we have students from 60 countries, 80 countries in the world in Sacramento. more than 80 countries actually. And so I would say, don't just say I teach ESL, or I teach blah, blah, blah. Of course, I know how to deal with equity. Of course, I know how to deal with diversity. Oh, I think we are on the wrong slide.
Yeah, previous slide, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And so I think, and also the other pitfall that I've seen is people confuse equality with equity. And so please do make sure that you don't use equality and equity interchangeably. One thing that I know that we look for a lot is not just I attend X and Y, activities. If you do have the opportunity to participate, to lead an activity, to initiate something, it would be something that would make you stand out. Because attending something is pretty simple, but well, I shouldn't say simple because you're busy, you're from, you teach on different campuses, but it is something that's more doable than leading or initiating something. And so I would say, if you have that kind of experience, if you do that, then please make sure that you emphasize that in your answer. And again, I said this earlier, even though you don't see the word diversity, the words diversity, equity, inclusion in all the questions, it is really a must for you to try to include all those that you practice, not just theoretically understood. Put them out there in every question possible. I mean, as simple as, for example, in a classroom situation, how do you organize group work? That can be a place where you talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion. Eliciting answers from students, encouraging participation. Talk about how, in some cultures, some people, sit in the corner because it's not part of the culture to raise their hands, but it doesn't mean that they don't have the answers. They just need to be invited. So simple things that you can give as examples as well as to how you conduct your classroom. So in really include it in every answer possible, even technology. We know in the pandemic, we know that, inequity in technology is a big issue, but prior to that, I don't think that we looked at that too much. And so again, if you have a question about technology, that's where you can talk about when you integrate technology in your work, how do you do it so that you don't leave those who are disadvantaged behind? And again, that's the area where you would show that you understand what equity means and you know how to integrate in your practice equity, diversity, inclusion. And so what to include, I would say, if you have specific examples, that would be the best thing. I think committees, at least me, I feel really, how do I put it? People would give a whole list of, I think this should be done. This can, I would do this, I would do that. No, please do. I have done this. I have done the following list, assuming that you have. Then please say, I have done it, I did this, I tried this, not just I would do something, because I would is, hypothetical. How do we know, that you really can put theory or understanding into practice? But again, I think everyone here, all the committee members here would agree with me that it's not just one diversity, equity, inclusion question. It's, you should put it in every possible answer that you give, even in your background, about your education, about your background. If you had to go through adversity, if you came from a disadvantaged position, talk about how you did it. Talk about how you would use that in your role as a counselor, as a classroom faculty, as a coordinator. So it is a must, and it's a very, very, very important element in the job interview everywhere.
And I would add, one thing is that, there's been a lot of discussion throughout the state among part-time faculty about the degree to which part-time faculty have been invited, encouraged, compensated for attending, for ongoing professional development, including, how to be a better classroom or non-classroom, faculty member and working with diverse populations. And so I think showing an authentic interest in learning and, being honest about where you see room for yourself to learn more. It's something that's been emphasized in Los Rios. I don't want to take too much time to explain details, but if anyone's interested in hearing about the equity reflection that we in Los Rios now complete as part of our performance review process, contact Oranit or myself, as we understand it, we're the first district in the state to be doing that.
One more thing that I would say, please don't say I'm married to someone from Asia. And assume that would mean that you practice equity, diversity, and inclusion in your classroom. And don't really, I had people who would go on and on about, being married to someone, having friends from different cultures. Make it really concrete about what you do in applying, in practicing equity, diversity, and inclusion. Sorry, Linda.
That's okay. Next slide. We are nearing the end, but we just want to make sure we get to talking about the teaching demo, and then we have a little bit on second level interviews, and then we're going to open it up for questions and answers. So teaching demo, I believe Cornelia, Mohamed, Andrew all had things in particular they wanted to say.
Yeah. So teaching demo is your time to shine. This is, you can do what you love to do most. And also this is usually an area where you can prepare because you get the instructions. So make sure you read the instructions, you stick to the instructions. Usually you get 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, you usually don't get more. And most of the time, you are asked to give an introduction to a class. And that class usually like 60 minutes, 90 minutes, you only get 15. So make it the true first 15 minutes of this class. Don't try to cram the whole material of the 90 minutes into those 15. It's not working and it will not work. So yeah, you might only get to, if you are introducing a new chapter of the textbook, you might only get to page 2. That is totally okay. This is what they want to see. They want to see what you are doing in those first 15 minutes. It's great. It's always a great practice if you go ahead at the very beginning and kind of link your today's lecture of where that falls in the semester, what you did last time. So let's connect what we are doing today. Always be aware of the time limit. A well-prepared committee will give you a 2-minute warnings, like for, in our college, in our department, I had one of the team members holding up a paper. It said it had a big 2, and it basically gave you a visual warning when you had to come to an end. Important is that you bring everything you need. Your PowerPoint slide, bring printouts. You have to have a backup plan. Usually they should have technology that works, but who knows, things can go wrong. So you must be prepared to give the teaching demo without your PowerPoint slides. So if you have your PowerPoint slides printed, that would be a good idea, at least like maybe bring 10 sets of them. Chalk, board markers that work. Do not assume that anything is there. Usually they have it, you will not need it, but my suggestion is you will feel better if you bring your own stuff. Same thing as with the interview, rehearse it, right? Like practice it with family, friends, colleagues. Practice your board writing. If you want to write something on the board, practice that. Maybe a good idea, you write your name at the beginning on the board for this. Just act as if you are in an actual class. Yep, that's for this slide. We have another slide on teaching demos later. But maybe I think Mohamed would also wanted to also speak on the last one. Or Andrew, or
Cornelia, thank you. Yeah, you covered most of this excellently. I would just say rehearsing is crucial, and in my example, it was a cybersecurity topic, and they give you ample enough time to prepare for this. So really use that to be fully prepared. And if you normally ask your students questions, even though it's on Zoom, you can as well ask, and your interviewers can respond in the chat, and it could be more engagement as well. So do what you normally do with your students, but be extra prepared in terms of having your demo ready, and mind the time limit, as Cornelia mentioned.
Andrew, did you want to jump in?
On the next slide, so I can just.
You're good?
get
Okay.
through.
So next slide, there we go.
All right, so real quick, we're just gonna talk about how to interact with the students or the people that's in the hiring committee. Honestly, main thing that I would do, be interactive. Now, what I did in my interview was when I was teaching and doing my demonstration, you want to utilize them, but I didn't have them answer. For instance, I would say, I'm going to call on my friend and ask them, hey, can you tell me what you think socialization means? Pause and then say, thank you, friend. So you're correct. Socialization is, so because a lot of the times the people will not answer. So but you want to show that you're interactive. You want to show that, you're not just up there and socialization is. So make it interactive, make it catchy, but utilize them as props, but don't really use them, if that makes sense. For time purposes, if you have any questions on any more of that, ask in the Q&A or email me. Okay.
Terrific. I think next slide.
So I was just going to say there's a lot in the chat about that, those students and, the committee as your students, and faculty have all sorts of fun with people in the interview being students. And you should have classroom management of them. So take control of them like you would your students, right? Which is what we're trying to find out. And some committees will not have fun, and some committees will really play up that student role. But if it says, that the committee is your students, you really need to show that you're a teacher and that you have that skill of classroom management, and that you can engage with them at whatever level they're, of obnoxiousness or play along that they're doing. You got to go with it. So just pretend that they're students and do it like you would normally do it in a classroom, because we have students who are obnoxious in the classroom. We have students who won't answer in the classroom. We have students who are great, reading something else. I had a student who was like reading a Playboy magazine once in my class when I was a grad student. I'm like, what are you doing? Right. And I had to get control of the class. So often you will find the committee doing similar behaviors to see what your classroom management is. So that's why we're doing that, just trying to clear up the chat. So that's good. I'm next, right? So I can segue, huh, Linda? Okay.
Yep.
So
yeah, and don't shy away from asking questions or really in trying to, and even if maybe they're balking, but try to involve the faculty, the committee members as if they were students. And this part of the teaching demo is really crucial. Our committees have always looked in how well was the applicant able to engage the students. If the student, we usually had real students, but even if in those committees where there was faculty, how well can you connect with your audience? That is super important. And And especially if you have faculty sitting there in the committee, it helps to have practiced that with others because it's such a kind of artificial situation.
Yeah, Cornelia, that's you just cued me into something I forgot to say. It is the most important part of the interview. Hands down the most important, because you can have an unbelievable interview, you have a crappy teaching demo, you're not getting the job, right? Because we're hiring you to teach. And often the teaching demo is worth a lot more in points when we score the interview too. So often, and it depends on local process. I've said this about 10 times in the chat, everybody's local process is a little different, but often we score each question. So as you're answering questions, each committee member scoring you. And often the teaching demo is worth a lot more points. So that teaching demo is super important. That's what you do. You can shine. We know you can shine. You've been doing it. So just keep doing it. Second level interview is really about if you're a good fit for the district. And this is where if you have not done your research on the institution and who's there and who they want and why they want that type of person, you're going to really struggle in that final interview. Again, dress to impress. It's usually with administrators. It's often with the vice president of instruction, if not the president or chancellor of the college. It's with high level administrators, sometimes a faculty member. So this will be usually couple of administrators and a faculty member. And the questions are all over the damn map. I cannot give you, like we gave you a set of standard questions. I cannot tell you what they're going to ask because they ask all sorts of different things. But what they're trying to figure out is if you're a good fit for that specific institution. How do you know about that institution? You've got to talk to people at that institution. You've got to research the heck out of it. You've got to figure out who those, you can call HR and say, who will be in the second level interview? Who am I interviewing with? They will tell you. And then look at those people, find out if you can find out anybody about those people and how they tick and what they're interested in and hit keywords that they would be interested in. That's the best way to get past that final level. Connection to the community, we're community colleges. You know, are you connected to the community? If it's a career education position, how are you going to connect to industry? Because that's a big part of being in a career education discipline. And then you should know about things like, the board. Is it a 5-member board or 7-member board? Is it a multi-college district or a single college district? How big? What's the head count? What's the FTS? Kind of that all of that stuff is important to show that you've done your research. But wow, second level interviews are very, very intense. I can't say that they're fun. They are usually more conversational though. They are usually a little bit more conversational, a little less rigid than the initial interviews with the faculty. If you make it through the second level, that's when they're going to often check your references. If you've made it to the second level, the faculty body has determined you can do the job. And really, most of the time, it's going to be an administrator is going to pick who gets it at that point. So the administrator is going to say, after interviewing somewhere between 2 to 5, I would say usually 3 is the average. After interviewing 3 people, this is the person for the job.
Can I throw something in?
Yeah.
I just want to throw something in. So it's been a little while now. It's been almost 20 years, but I was a finalist a couple of times. And I'm pretty sure that I completely screwed up my answer to one question in one of those final interviews, which was, what would you contribute to the college as a full-time faculty member beyond what you have as a part-time faculty member? Well, I'd been doing so much damn volunteer work. I literally said this, I guess I've matured a bit, maybe become more sophisticated since then. It's been a while. But I said, well, I'd be getting paid for the work that I've been doing, which I thought was perfectly reasonable. And I guess I made a political statement, but I'm not sure it did me any favors as a candidate. So audience awareness is your friend.
Thank you for that, Linda. I like that. Yeah, definitely. These are administrators. So they're not, they're a little different in their approach. And definitely they might not have, faculty body might have thought that was hilarious. I did, but yeah, they might not. So
if I may add something here, Linda, do we have time? So I would say for our district, of course, Wendy is right that you don't know what they're going to ask. But for our district normally the college president and the VP would meet with the committee at the end of the first round of interviews, like 2 days of straight interviews. Then they come in and we have a debriefing session with them. Normally in the second round, they would ask follow-up questions on something they're concerned about, something you don't answer completely. And so I would say, if you want to guess what they will ask, one way to do that is look at your answers to all the interview questions and say, which ones seem to be incomplete, which one leaves something for people to have desire to find out more about you, and then try to find a way to make the answers complete and or to elaborate, or to give examples. Normally follow-up questions would be something that in the second level interviews in Los Rios would happen. And I would say they like to make, at least my experience, in the second round, we would have the college president, the VP of instruction, and the dean of the area. And so when I had my second round of interview in 2001, they made me feel like it was just a chat. I know it wasn't a chat, but it was like a chat. You never know what questions they will ask. And I still don't know why they asked me about my hobby, but they did. Thank you.
So we want to make sure we're getting toward 6:45 and we're committed to finishing by 7. So I think we have one more slide that is about, Zoom concerns for virtual interviews. I don't think we need to read through this. For some, this may just be like, well, duh, but kind of good reminders. I think, okay, so Ray is back. So we have our kind of final slide here, just to remind you of the kind of work that FAC does and why FAC is so valuable, and why, if you're not a member, we really hope you will consider becoming a member. So we have some hands raised. So how about if we do that? I think Paul was first, and then Emily, and then Gabrielle.
Sure. So I had actually asked this question in the chat earlier, and it was mentioned, I think Wendy mentioned I could ask it now. And a few people had echoed similar stories, but so I had been to, over 2 years, I went to 2 final rounds in tenure track interviews, and I didn't get either of them. And then what I was told later through sort of inside information was that both times it was going to be an internal candidate both times. So, I mean, although it was offered publicly, it wasn't actually offered publicly. And so my question was if that happens often, or if that was a streak of bad luck. Yeah, it was disheartening. So
The answer to your question is I think it happens more often than it should, and it's against the law. So 100%. And I have seen it happen more often in administrative positions at my college than I have at faculty positions. But I think we pointed out the board policy and board policy, and oh my God, I'm too tired now. It's 7120. But you need to read through that and read through what the processes are and be aware of them and ask questions, because often what you'll find is they're not following process. And if we make sure that we're holding people to the process, that's the only thing you can really do. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it, right? But it's so frustrating to me. The other thing I want to say, Paul, is that not always are internal candidates the best candidates. I have seen as a faculty member more than one time, more than probably a dozen times, an internal candidate sink themselves because they're so familiar with the hiring committee that they don't fully answer the questions. And so I, as a committee selection person, I have to find evidence of you answering the questions of the things we're looking for. And I have so many of my part-timers just sort of shorthanding the questions because they're like, oh, Wendy knows. And I can't take what I know of them from over here and put it down. They have to deliver it, right? And so that's what happens is a lot of times I've seen more times the internal candidates sync themselves than that internal candidate sort of getting the job in front of other people. I was one of those external candidates that got it in front of an internal candidate that supposedly it was promised to. And she let me know it too.
Ooh.
I heard all about it. And I heard her interview was horrific. And the problem was that she just didn't answer all the questions. So super important if you're internal to make sure that you're thoroughly answering the questions and approaching it like you've never, ever, 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 ever seen any of them before and you know nothing about what you've already known. And if you're outside, you need to make sure they're following process because it's against the law to promise a public position to anyone.
Cool. Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate that.
Great. I think Emily was next. Thanks, Paul.
My question was regarding the committee providing the interview questions ahead of time. And I've been on a couple Zoom interviews where the questions weren't provided. And I found myself trying to answer questions where maybe you guys have had this experience where it's actually 3 questions kind of in one. And you're so nervous that you get lost and you forget the questions. And I've, found myself asking them, can you repeat the question again? So I'm wondering if it's acceptable to ask ahead of time, if the questions can be provided. I know there are rules. For example, you have to, if you do one thing for one candidate, you have to do the same thing for all candidates. So I wonder if there's a way to get, in an equitable way, those questions ahead of time, if it's possible.
Emily, in my district, each department is different, I should say. Some departments say we are going to give them, the candidates, the interview questions in advance. Some people don't. Some campuses, we have 4 campuses, and some campuses do, some campuses don't. But I think if they do, you will get it. You don't even have to ask for. If they don't, you can ask and they wouldn't give it to you, as you said, because they have to treat everyone equally, right? And so I would say the main thing here is if you don't have the questions and they read the questions, I would write down the keywords because you can't write fast enough and you need to also make eye contact with them, right? You don't want to just write all the time. So write the keywords and that's all you can do. And you can ask them to repeat, I guess, but again, some places like my campus, we kind of don't really, we kind of want to do the same thing for everyone. And again, I think maybe things will change, but repeating, some committee would agree to repeat, some committee would say would not repeat. And so, or they would just give you something that's not complete. So I would say take notes. If you can, write the keywords.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I just wanted to add, like when I was doing it, I totally asked because there's some questions where there's 3 questions in one.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I just want to make sure. Like I repeated the question back at one point because it was such a loaded question. I was like, I just want to make sure I'm going to answer this right. Did I hear this correctly? And they responded yes. So I did that.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know.
That sounds smart, Andrew. Gabrielle, you are next. Thanks, Emily.
Hi.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this workshop. I had a couple of questions. One was about transcripts. I struggle loading transcripts into these different databases because I have a lot of them. And so I wondered, should I just limit it to the highest level transcripts achieved and then let them ask for the rest? Or how does?
So that's a local question and I would call HR and they should have an alternate way for you to do it or help you do it if you're struggling to do it. But most of them will just want your highest level that says your degree. And then if you get the position, they're going to ask for all of them. But you definitely want to triple check with HR because that's one of those silly things that they might have in their process that says if you don't have all the transcripts. But if you took, Gabrielle, if you took like I don't know, some of your undergraduate classes at 3 different community colleges, you don't have to necessarily list that even in your application, right? You focus on where you got your bachelor's and your master's. And then, right. And so I would just focus on those 2, and those are the 2 ones that I would
okay. And then the other question I had, but I'm not sure if you answered it or gave a demo about it, was that equity part. Like one of the presenters said, you know, put that in everything. And I thought, I don't know how you put that in there without being clumsy, you know, like mentioning food and mentioning like, I have a friend, I have an Asian friend, like, cause I hate that. So I just
no, actually what I was saying was that is don't do that.
Right.
That is don't. And I would just say, when I said integrate everything, I mean, when you answer every question possible, you put how you practice equity, inclusion, and diversity in your classroom or as a counselor. I'm not saying that you have to talk about every single thing, but I'm saying integrate that concept, that practice into every single answer if it's possible.
I was just wondering if you could just give an example of doing that yourself.
So
like I said earlier, you know, when you, for example, if you talk about technology, right? Because there's usually a question about technology, you would say, while you want to use technology in such and such way, you are aware that some students might not have the resources or the skills. And so you would prepare them or get them resources in such a way.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
And I would add that this is where, you know, thinking this through ahead of time will serve you so well, talking it through with colleagues and friends, even people who aren't part of our system, you know, if sort of naive, you know, and thoughtful people, you know, could be really valuable in talking through this with you. So if you have on tap examples that truly are authentic to you, right? You don't want to come off as someone who's just talking the talk that you understand, oh, got the buzzwords, like gross, right? You want this to be, right? Because, you know, ugh, lip service, gross. I think your authentic examples of decisions you've made in the past or even dilemmas you've had that demonstrate that you're mindful of all of, you know, of diversity, equity, inclusiveness, anti-racism, that this is just like the air you breathe. This is part of your decision-making processes all the time. It's going to come across as part of you and part of how you work with students. So I hope that was valuable. I'm sorry I cut into Kathy's time. You're next. Thank you, Gabrielle.
Okay, first of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Because I sometimes use 2 different computers and I have to keep one down and not the other when I'm teaching. Well, I have 2 questions. One, there was mentioned that, so if I have a PhD, I should de-emphasize that or list it, but don't only talk about the teaching experiences I've had at community colleges, and that I feel that I'm helping to train them for a 4-year university, or is that considered weird?
I was the one who talked about that. So let me put it this way. That's why it's important that you do your research, because even on my campus, in biology, everybody has a PhD. And so if you look at, when you do your research, you look at the faculty for that department, right? You see that everyone has a PhD, then you know that there's probably some kind of appreciation for a doctorate, right? And if you look at the faculty, profile information, and you see most people, have a master's and very few people have a PhD, I would assume that, a PhD is not something that they would pursue because it's not required. It's hard to guess because I have served on so many committees, and some committees say we're going to give extra points, and some committees say no, because we only need someone with a master's, so we are not going to give extra points. You know what I'm saying? So it's hard to gauge, it's hard to guess. But I would say that if you are at a community college, you don't want to include pages and pages and pages of publications, because you give people the impression, that's what I heard from people who, don't have a doctorate. They would go, what is this person expecting to do here? We are not a research institution, you know what I'm
Right.
saying? And so I would say list some current, some relevant publications and research or presentations, but not, pages and pages and pages, just the ones that are relevant to the job. Just like Cornelia said, you want to customize your application to the position.
Okay, and my second one was in
Wait,
reference.
Kathy, can I say something about that? Yes, list your PhD. We want to know that you have it, but focus your materials on teaching, not on publishing.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And the second question was in reference, because the one that always confuses me, the sample teaching demonstration that in, I think like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and you're saying that they can't really respond. So I think someone said that make it seem like you're focusing on the first 15 minutes of it, not a summary of it, or is it best to describe a teaching activity if they, for instance, ask for a certain type of topic, something that I thought was successful. So like, am I saying, well, like I'm calling on you, but I answer for them, or to describe what has happened in a teaching example, or maybe an exercise that I do that I think is successful with students?
You're teaching. So you should be teaching. I've had people talk about teaching and say, this is what I would do in the teaching demo. I want to see you teaching. And so the idea is that, I teach in photography, and maybe we'll say the exposure triangle. So give us 10 minutes on the exposure triangle. And then we have people that start way back with defining what an f-stop is. And there's no way they're going to get through what, the content of the exposure triangle if they go way, way back. So what you have to say is something like, hi students, here today we're talking about the exposure triangle. Remember last week we talked about shutter speed, f-stop, and ISO. Today we're talking about the triangle, and then next week we're going to go out and practice with our cameras. So boom, and you launch right into that 10 minutes. So you have to put it in time and place within, say, a semester class. You have to put and really teach. Don't talk about it. Do it, and don't explain yourself away. Just do it like you would with your students.
Okay, and that would also include when they say, if you had this problem between two students, you would.
Oh no, that's not a teaching demo. That would be, that's a situational question, and that would be a good time to bring in an example of how what you did in a situation. And then that's also a great thing to bring in the DEIA work, right? Where you can say, and here's an example of when I used equity in the classroom, or when I, celebrated diversity, right? So that's where you can bring those other things into.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, so we have Vanessa up, Evan, Selena, Emily, Iana, and I'm not sure whether any of us are able, or whether we were going to extend beyond 7. What I was thinking was, if we don't get to you, will you make sure that your question's in the chat? And if you would like one of us to respond to your question, put your email in the chat just to indicate that, or say, I'd really appreciate an answer. Maybe that's kind of a workaround to the number of questions we have. Vanessa, you are next.
Yeah, thanks everyone for this. This was really insightful and really helpful. My question sort of piggybacks on Kathy's question about PhD. So I have an MFA, and considering pursuing the PhD, because I've been doing some really great work with equity in my college and actually developing a program on my own for that to help historically marginalized students that fill gaps that ideologies like growth mindset and grit do not take into consideration. And so I'm really excited to take this to a PhD level and to go deeper into that and sort of have that kind of flesh out into the world. But then I look at going full-time, and I'm thinking about the MFA versus the PhD. Going in with an MFA or spending my time going for the PhD and then sort of circling back is sort of where I am right now, trying to decide about that, although I'm going to pursue all avenues. But what would be your advice? And another thing I'd like to say is that these sessions are great and we get so much information, and I have a whole thing of screenshots and everything, but it would be great if we had something like a coaching mentorship, like an office hour. So if you're in the midst of doing this, there is an office hour you can go into and talk to 1 or 2 people and have them look at your stuff or discuss different ideas. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
So I think I'm going to take your question. Vanessa, I think you really need to do what is the most interesting to you. And I know that might not be the answer that's very helpful, because
It's
again,
super helpful.
because of, you know, a PhD is your heart and soul, your blood and energy is everything you have to give, right? And so I would say it's you really need to say, am I really interested in this? Do I want to know more about this topic? Because for me, I think PhD is really a pile higher and deeper. It's just the same topic, but you go really deep, right? If that's your interest, do it, because again, some people say, well, EDD is not as good. Well, again, it depends on what you want to do, right? And so I would say, ask yourself what works best for you, what is the most interesting for you, what is something that you are willing to spend your whole weekend on and your night into the late nights to study and to write papers on, to write your dissertation. So it really should be what you are crazy about. Let me put it this way.
Yeah, and you're so right, because I'm not interested in the vanity metric of the PhD, and I'm not interested in a pile of research. I'm interested in getting this work out on a deeper level, and the support of institutions and great mentors to get this equity technique into the hands of historically marginalized students across the nation is what gets me really excited. So thanks.
Sure.
Wendy, I'm going to defer to you. What do you think? Do we have time for any more questions?
Yeah,
Do we need to end? What do you
two
think?
hands that are up. It's fine with
Okay,
me.
I think Selena had written, but Selena, if you still want to speak, please do. And thank you, Vanessa.
Yes, I was just asking about a teaching philosophy statement, if you guys had any suggestions or advice on writing that.
Yeah, I would just Google teaching philosophy and look at some examples and see which ones speak to you. You're sort of, you know, that's your moment to, and some districts don't ask for it. I almost always include it when I can, because I just think it's a really important document. But it's, you know, what is your philosophy in teaching and how do you approach it? And we really are teaching institutions. So it makes me crazy when we don't ask for a teaching philosophy, but it sounds crazy, but Google teaching philosophy, how do I write it? And look at some examples and then start to break down those pieces parts. I think that's the best way to do it.
Okay.
And you should definitely include DEIA, how you're approaching that.
Okay, thank you.
If I may add, I would say you also want to make sure that whatever you look at is connected to your classroom practice if you're in a teaching position, applying for a teaching position.
Okay.
And I was thinking to add, the way I understand a teaching philosophy statement is you want to articulate your values and you want to provide evidence that you actually do your damnedest to live up to your values, right? and that you self-assess, you're interested in making improvements and changing and growing and learning. So I don't think that it necessarily should signal to you that you have to use a lot of technical pedagogical language. Maybe others would disagree with me, but it seems that they're looking to see, again, do you know how to do this authentically and are you a learning teacher versus, you know, an ossified teacher? Are you someone who's learning and growing?
Got it.
Emily, yeah, no, thank you. Emily is next.
Yes, hi. I don't think anyone had a chance to answer this, and it may be unique to my situation, but when I contacted the HR department, they said to go ahead and fill out the equivalency form along with the application, even though my degrees almost exactly match the qualifications. And now I'm faced with a situation where there's this long equivalency and there are these 11 long essay type questions on the application, and there's a lot of repetition. So I'm trying to figure out, you know, now that I've written a page for the first question on the application, can I also use it on the equivalency form, or does that all need to be new and unique material, even though that's sort of, it's all about work experience and education. So the questions are very repetitive. Do I need to come up with something new?
Yeah, without seeing it, it would be hard to tell, but this would be a great question for the actual HR department. And
Okay.
if you could talk to anybody who works at that school or that district, typically equivalency forms will be more extensive if you're trying to say, like, I don't have a master's degree, but I'm trying to show work experience as my master's. If you're just trying to equate two masters, it would be very easy to say, you know, this master's degree is what master's degree you require is 30 units, and I'm missing one class, and my master's degree is 30 units, and I took this class and it's very similar to that class. Like, it should be that easy if you're really just saying, I have a master's and it's just called something else, but it's in a similar discipline.
Right. I mean, my master's is in education in general, and they want education, elementary education, or, you know, 5 different types of education. And so I'm not.
Did you look at the minimum quals handbook?
I did. And it's the same question I have. I can't quite get an answer. Even when I emailed HR, they kind of said, well, if you're not sure, just send in the equivalent form. But it is like a 3-page form with all different essay questions.
Okay, I would email info@asccc.org and ask them if your master's, give the exact title of your master's and what the discipline is, and say, does this mean, do you know if can you help me with minimum quals?
Okay, do you mind typing that into the chat real quick?
Yeah,
I just missed it.
I will.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your help.
Earl, I think you're up. Thanks, Emily.
Earl, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted. We're not hearing you yet.
How about now?
Yay, perfect.
A couple things. You were talking about references, and I had a question about that because I've been at my community college for a very, very long time. And you talked about how it's important to get to know people at the college, know people in your department. And the only ones that I'm aware of that would be on the hiring committee are the dean and the department chair. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but the other faculty, if you want to ask them to be a reference, how would you know? Because it sounds like there's a timing disconnect when those interviews are set up. So how would you know if they're on the hiring committee? And when is it not a good idea? Say, for example, the department chair, I know my department chair very well. Is it not okay to ask him for a reference?
If he's going to be on the committee, he can be a listed reference, but he can't be a letter of recommendation usually. That's usually the difference.
Well,
but it depends on the school, right?
Okay. Yeah, in Los Rios, we can do both. So I would say you just ask and they will tell you if they can do it or not, because in some districts like ours, we can.
Okay. The second part is, and I'm glad to see all these people in the room. Man, this is like going to a big movie theater. One of the things that I learned that Wendy touched on, actually, when we were talking about what you should be doing other than just teaching part-time and say leaving the classroom or heading home or teaching on a virtual environment and just teaching your part-time classes, and that's it. I learned back in 2018 when I really started thinking about teaching full-time. I had one of the executives at my community college tell me when I asked him, well, I like to teach full-time. You know, I've been working in industry for 40 years here at Vandenberg, and I'm thinking about teaching full-time. And he said, well, what else do you do at the college besides teaching part-time? And I said, nothing. Well, I said, if you want to think about teaching full-time, you need to get involved at the college. You need to get involved in some committees, and you got to get on some committees and get on some clubs. So for the last 3 years, that's what I've been doing is I've been involved in clubs and I'm involved in committees, and I'm getting involved as much as I can at the college, because where I teach at is extremely important for the part-time faculty to be involved more at the college than just teaching if they want to go from part-time to full-time.
Am I up?
I think you are. I was just wondering if there was a question or if that.
No one else's comment. Well, actually, I wanted you to laugh, but no, it just opened my eyes up to, I wasn't aware that I needed to be involved more at the college in order to go from part-time to full-time, because normally they said you will not get hired if you don't do other things at the college. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Earl. My question is a very small 3-part question. I'm very concerned about the length of my materials, and I heard that Wendy said it was okay for the letter of intent to be more than 1 page, which really was surprising to me. I always thought it had to be strictly 1 page, as well as the teaching philosophy. So it's okay if those 2 go over a page?
I've never heard one district tell me there was a page limit on any of those materials. I've never heard that. I've heard a lot of shit. I'm sorry, stuff. Oh gosh, it's being recorded. Bleep me, but it's getting late. But I've never heard a page limit.
Okay, great. And then, so I'm also an art professor, and my CV is quite long with exhibitions. And I've always heard that to be a relevant art instructor, you need to be showing in at least 15 shows a year. And so my CV is probably like 8 to 9 pages long. Okay, all right, that's what I wanted to know. I got the good thumbs up. I like that.
2 of them.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
As a writing, and again, pulling out my composition writing hat thing, I would again just recommend that anyone, if you're concerned like, oh God, is this too long? What matters more than length in and of itself is, are you being concise? Are you writing powerfully? Is your reader, imagine Wendy, Oranit, etc., having read 90 letters, and are they going to be captivated like, God, I just read 3 pages, it flew by, right? Like, because it's so well, it's well constructed. And that's where having other people read, giving you feedback, maybe, looking for word cutting, even how to make it move quickly, and be powerful and informative. You could probably get a lot in there.
And thank you, Linda. And I would say, Christine, really, when I have to read, over 100 applications, 150 applications, I like people who would be concise and give examples, but not wordy. So maybe, I know it's hard to do, but find someone like Linda to help you edit.
A passion. I'm looking for passion, right? And I had somebody who's a college president now, so I won't say the name, but this person showed me their letter of intent for a college position, a president position, but not the one that they ended up getting. And I read the letter and I said, this is the most boring, lacking in passion letter I have ever read in my life. I would not hire you for anything. And he was so pissed off, but I said, it's true. It's not a narrative of your resume. That's not the letter of intent, right? It has to just ooze passion and commitment, and you're excited, and you've read that job announcement, and you are the one, you are the only apple, right? Perfect for them. And it's hard to do. It's going to take time, but it's worth it.
All right, thank you so much.
Sure.
I think we're done here.
Wow, we're over time.
No, we're not.
Yeah.
Mark has his hand up.
Uh-oh.
Well,
We have a
Mark,
minute
need
or
to-
bring
not.
us home, Mark.
No.
Bring us home.
I was going to say, I've got to do another academic job at 7:30 besides teaching. So I'm going to have to hop off in a minute.
Really quick, Mark. You're muted.
Some of us can't raise our hands.
Oh, I don't know why that's happening.
Go to reactions.
Well, we're gonna have to
I
get off.
just want to say that about reactions and how to get your students involved. And a lot of times, and I've mentioned this in the chat about getting out of the comfort zone. And I'm not talking about making them, like, how do I say it? Like in fear or in being grossed out or whatever, or doing something that's inappropriate, but just getting them out of their comfort zone. And I do that through different means, and I want to get them out of that box that they're in. And a lot of times they feel maybe uncomfortable, but I say, that's okay. That's good, because then you could put that towards your writing and put that feeling into your writing, and it becomes more powerful. And that's what I've been trying to do in my class, and I think it's working. I haven't had too many complaints.
Great. Thank you for
But,
sharing, Mark. Are there any, do you have a question? We're just over time and exhausted.
No, I was
so-
just wanting to comment. I think it was Earl and somebody was talking about getting out of,
Yes.
doing more to get them interested.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Vanessa posted that we should have an office hour. I think that's a great idea. So we'll see if we
Yes.
can make that happen where we can chat. So we still have hands coming up, and we're 16 minutes over the hour. So is this something you guys could email us?
I have a
Julie,
class to
Marcella?
I have a class to teach.
Yep,
Yeah, dinner's ready.
we got to call it.
Yeah, we do.
So I want to thank
Yeah.
Linda. You're amazing for helping us be our moderator.
Oh, sure.
And thank you to our whole panel. Thank you to our staff members. If you guys don't know who FAC is, please look us up. We do a lot of good work, particularly in the legislative area, and then professional development. That's sort of our two wheelhouses. We'll post the recording to this, and then we'll also send you all a link because you registered for it. So it'll go to the email that you registered. We've put the PowerPoint in the chat a few times, but we'll put it in the email again so that you have it. And then our email addresses are in that PowerPoint, so you can email us. And we'll hopefully be able, don't email all of us your question, email one of us your questions, because we don't want to all have to answer the same question. So pick your favorite. Thank you everybody for coming. Again, thank you to Linda. I think she had to pop off because she had a class to teach, but we really appreciate all your time, and hopefully it was helpful, and we'll improve upon it. And please email us if you have other questions that you'd like us to try and answer.